Amen.
We read Matthew 1 through 5 and talked about that last week. Well, we split the Sermon on the Mount just the way that it worked out. Started in chapter 5. So chapters 6 and 7 continue the Sermon on the Mount. We'll get to the question that was raised last week. Great question. But it's talking in Matthew chapter 6. It begins to talk about your charitable deeds. King James calls them your alms. When you do your alms, New King James, starting in verse 1, take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Verse 2, therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Who does this type of thing from the passage that we've read about? How are they described? Hypocrites. What's a hypocrite? Do as I say, not as I do. What did you say, Miss June? Does anybody know what the original word literally means?
Actor.
A player on a stage. Somebody else said an actor. That's exactly what it is. You act one way, but that's not really who you are, is it? And so you give these charitable deeds, but why are you doing it? Why is this person, why are these hypocrites doing it? To be seen of men, to be selfish reasons. They may give $1 million. Is God pleased with them? These hypocrites? Not just to be seen of men. But that's why they are doing it. This is leading into the question that comes on. It was actually asked regarding prayer. When the basket is being passed around, and this is an interesting one, and I thought about this. When that basket is being passed around, we had some people at Town Acres. They came out of the denominational world, and of course were growing, and I appreciated them for their sincerity. But they insisted on having an envelope each Sunday. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, it might be a good idea. I don't know. You can just fold your check in half and do the same. But they wanted an envelope because of this passage. We don't want people to see that we're giving. My thinking was, I didn't say it at the time, just let them grow a little bit, is they see you put an envelope in, they're going to know. But, of course, I didn't say that. We talked about it and preached and studied this text together. Does it matter if you look over there and happen to notice me putting a check in? Have I broken? Have I violated this passage? Now, how about if I stand up before the collection and I turn around, make sure everybody can see me? My check is extra big. I want one of those big checks like they give out at the television show or whatever, those prize checks. How about if I take one of those and I put it? Well, obviously that's ridiculous. But so was this. Sounding a trumpet before them so they could, hey, everybody, make sure you see me. Make sure you watch what I'm doing. But that's what they were doing. And so, is it talking about making sure that you're secret when you give? Is that what it's talking about? It's your attitude. And only you can know that. If you're giving to be seen of men.
You act your reward.
That's right. They've seen you do it. However, I remember when we were in school, in this, I don't even know, I want to open up this can of worms, but Brother Cates taught us to fold a dollar bill, how that no one could ever tell if it was a $1 bill, $5 bill, or $20 bill, or $100 bill. And he was saying, like, you're going to hold a meeting for visiting someplace, well, you've already given at your home congregation. But you better put that in there because some people will be watching you to see if you're giving. Now, the attitude's a little bit differently there. I'm not doing it, so especially if I'm only giving a $1 bill, I'm not doing it to be seen of men. But just in case they're watching, don't want to make anybody stumble. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I thought about that when I was reading this week. And just in case they were watching. Here's another question that we'll have with this. If you give $1 million to be seen of men, and this doesn't really have to do with this. But we talked about the amount. We ought to give as much as we can, no doubt about it. But what if the most I can give is a dollar bill?
So be it.
So be it. Yeah, it's not the amount, it's the heart. So then he goes on with prayer in verse 5. When you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly I say to you, they have their reward. What were these hypocrites wanting to do? Very similar to what the givers were wanting, the hypocrite givers. That's right. And so what would they do? They would stand in the synagogue and on the corners of the streets. For what purpose? Just to be seen by men. Here's the question that came up Sunday, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. What about when you go out to eat and you pray as a family at a restaurant? Would that fit this? And if so, how would it fit? And how does it not fit? I didn't ask that question well. Okay. What would, in order to be condemned, according to this passage, what would I need to be doing it for? If I'm praying in a restaurant to be seen of men, then am I breaking this? Yeah. If I pray, lead a public prayer here at Forest Hill to impress people, to be seen of men, so that when I get done, boy, Mark, the way that you worded that prayer, all that language you used was just beautiful, poetic, enlightening, and that's the reason I pray. Have I violated this passage? Yeah, absolutely. There's the difference. If I am out to eat with our family and we just bow our head and say a quick prayer, have I done anything that violates this passage if our hearts are right? So what do we need to be checking then in all of these?
Our intent.
We need to check our intent, don't we? Mindy and I were at one of our favorite restaurants the other night. Actually, our favorite restaurant probably in Memphis. And we've got a lot of them, but it's number one, I think. But, and you know, I'm not judging. We're going to talk about that in the next chapter. But what this group did, and I wanted to talk to them so badly to see what denomination they were from. But there was a group of like 6 or 7 or 8 people, I don't know. But they went around the table and they each prayed. They each said the prayer, both the men and the women, as they went around. And during each prayer, they're yes, 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 and all of that. Now, of course, I don't know their motives. I don't know their motives. But if they were doing that to be seen of men, they would be condemned. They've got other problems anyway, I know that. But that's the attitude. That's the attitude. Now, here's the thing. Let's flip this on its end. If I see somebody giving, and I see somebody praying, and I think to myself, they're doing that just to be seen of men, who has the problem?
They do.
They do, we do.
It talks about the theme in your own eyes.
That's exactly right. So I'm setting the stage for chapter 7. Chapter 7, judging unrighteously. Then he goes into the model prayer. When he talks about prayer, he says, therefore don't be like them. And Luke tells us that his disciples came to Jesus and said, Lord, teach us to pray. As John taught his disciples, teach us. And I just want you to think about this, and I've probably shared this with you before, but it just boggles my mind, the attitude in this prayer. When Jesus says, after this manner, therefore pray ye, our Father, which art in heaven. And I know I've preached on that before, but just Jesus using the word Father. That was so rare. 15 times in the Old Testament where God was called their Father. And all but one place, it was a prophet or a preacher or somebody reminding the people that God is the Father. Only one time in the book of Isaiah does a group of people call God their Father. And so it was very unusual during that time. And if I'm not mistaken, you have to check me on this, I think just 70 times in the prayers of Jesus alone, he calls God Father. And it's over 150 times that God is called Father in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John alone. And then you look at the apostles' prayers and the other prayers in the New Testament over and over and over again. They got the message. They called God their Father. Just that relationship that we have with God, how does He want us to think of Him? As a Father. Now that's awesome right there, isn't it? That He wants us to think of Him as a Father. I know, and you know, how you feel for your own children. If you're a good parent, you know how you want them to look at you, how you want them to trust you, how you want them to love you and feel protected by you and all of that. How does God want us to feel about Him? I trust you. You'll protect me. You'll take care of me. That's coming on later on in this chapter. But then this, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. And then this phrase right here is awesome. On earth as it is in heaven. Is God's will done in heaven? Is His name held in awe in heaven? What do the angels do? You know. And so think about this prayer. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. As much as your name is hallowed in heaven, as much as your name is revered in heaven, as much as your will is done in heaven, Father, let it be done here too. What a prayer. What a prayer. And then, of course, I wish we had time to talk about the rest of it. He talks about fasting, verse 16, again, the same concept. These people were disfiguring themselves, these hypocrites, so they could be seen by men. Now, look at me. Look at me. That's right. I'm fasting, and you need to know that I'm really, really holy. Because look at me. I haven't eaten in 3 hours. That's fasting to me. You need to know right now I'm already thinking about what I'm going to have for a snack when I get it. I'm not kidding. But they were disfiguring themselves so that other people were looking at them and saying, now there goes a holy man right there. Man, that guy right there. He is holy. Does that mean we have to walk around and make sure, all right, I can't let anybody see me do anything good. I can't let anybody hear my prayer. I can't let anybody see that I'm striving to do God's will. Is that what it's talking about? Where does it all start and really end?
In your heart.
That's right. I know myself. So the question to ask, and this is a good question. What are my motives? And we need to use that in every aspect of our lives. What are my motives? That's a good question to ask yourself every day, isn't it? What are your motives? I know as a preacher, we've got a lot of preacher students here. Man, ask yourself that question every day. Why do you preach? Is it so after you're done, people can tell you, man, that was a great sermon. That was just a terrific sermon. Is that why you're doing it? I wouldn't know. I've never heard that. But just kidding. Is it because, I want to get a name for myself? What are your motives for what you do as a Christian? Does that matter to God? Absolutely. And now, the thing about this, and I knew I would get on the soapbox too much on this and give us like 5 minutes for the other points. But when you look at the world's religions, Christianity as a whole, you see I'm using air quotes, and just not Christianity, but Hinduism and Islam and all of these things, idol worshipers. But let's just keep it here to the main, quote, Christian religion in the United States. You think about what religion has come to so many people. I give, therefore I'm okay. I say a couple prayers, therefore I'm okay. I don't live in it all. I say a prayer, I'm okay. It's all about, oftentimes it's all about show rather than substance, isn't it? Now let's bring it down to us, members of the Lord's church. And listen very carefully to this. Does showing up on Sunday make us a Christian? No. Now we need to be here for obvious reasons. But if I'm showing up just to be seen, the elders won't call me because I've been here, you know, we'll keep them off my back. And other people who think I ought to be here, I'm here. If that's my attitude, do your motives matter? How about when we sing songs? Do your motives matter as we sing, as we pray? That's right. As we teach. Just every way our motives matter. And that's an important thing for us to remember, isn't it? Such an important thing. Then in chapter 7, he talks about, you know, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, or chapter 6, rather, verse 19. But I want to get to the end where it talks about worrying or being anxious. Verse 25, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will wear, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. And we've read this a bunch of times, so I'm not going to go into all of that. But here's the question I want to ask. We read verse 33 a lot. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And we apply that to a lot of things, and it's good. I mean, it doesn't break the context. It doesn't break other plain scriptures. But what's the context of this? What's he talking about starting in verse 25? What you'll eat, what you'll drink, what you'll wear. And then in that context, he says what he says in verse 33. But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. What he means?
He knows what we need before we ask for it.
That's right. What things is he talking about? Everything we want? See if you're awake. Those things that we need. Those things that we need. Does a bird wake up in the morning and say, oh no, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I don't have the worm yet. I don't have, this or that. Does a bird worry about that? Now, let's take this and connect it back with the model prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven. When I was a kid, I didn't worry at all about where my dad's next paycheck was coming from. I didn't worry about what we were going to have. Well, I guess I did. Just whether I'm going to like it or not like it. But I didn't worry about was there going to be food on the table, that day. I trusted my mom and dad. Now, my mom and dad are both humans. How much more should we trust our Father? Any other comments on chapter 6? Anybody come across anything that you wanted to share? All right, chapter 7. Do not judge is the heading of my Bible. Is that what yours said? Do not judge. Look at verse 1. Judge not. This is still the Sermon on the Mount. And if you just think about it, Jesus is sharing some things. We're going to see the reaction here. But judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. What does that mean? For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. What's that mean?
Critical. You're going to receive severe judgment.
That's right. You didn't hear what Tom said. If you're a hypercritical, you're going to receive severe judgment. Does that scare anybody else? If everybody in this world acted just like me, whether we'd have it made. That's the attitude a lot of people have, isn't it? If you could drive like me, if you could think like me, if you had the same taste that I have, if everybody would just act just like me. Yeah, it would. It'd be a boring place, wouldn't it? But not only that, what we're talking about is looking for the negatives in people. This is a big deal. When you look at other people, what do you look for in them? And don't answer these questions out loud, but this is really good for self-examination. Is my first, all right, I'm going to look at you. What can I find wrong with you? I'm going to look at you. What can I find wrong with you? If you look hard enough, can you find something wrong with everybody? Or is your attitude, when I look at you, what can I find right about this person? Number one, that's going to give you a much happier life And number two, according to this passage, I don't want God looking at me like sometimes I'm tempted to look at other people. Are you? Do you? It wouldn't take him a half of a split second to find faults in me. Judge not that you judge what judgment you judge, you will be judged. Let's go on down a little bit. Verse 3. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? You got a speck and you got a beam. The speck is in your brother's eye. Where's the beam? It's in your own eye. Now watch this. This is important. Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Then verse 5, hypocrite. Now watch. First, remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Because they say, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, help get a speck out of your brother's eye. Is that what it says? What does it say to do then? What's the order? You get rid of that beam in your eye so that you can see clearly to do what? Help him. Now, of course, we're talking in an illustration here. We're talking about sin and other things and missing people's lives. We judge with righteous judgment. Again, are motives important in this? And they are, aren't they? They are. And so the attitude is, listen, I want to come to you. I want to help you. I know I've got things that need corrected in my life. Would you help me as well? Let's help each other. Is that a better attitude? It definitely is, isn't it?
Because there's so many people that hang on that first verse.
Absolutely.
See?
Absolutely. Hang on to that first. You know, which is really a ridiculous thing to hang on to. Does everybody in here judge? You do. You've got to every day. Which is a better price? You know, do I want this kid babysitting my 3-year-old? Look at him. Did you give me your resume? Well, yeah, I did. You know, I paid license plates in prisons. What were you for? Well, I abused children. We make judgments every day, don't we? Well, what must we make sure that they are? Righteous judgment. And not be the type of person that looks for faults in other people. Question. Will I go to hell if that's the kind of person I am?
Don't make amends.
But that's right. If I don't make amends, if I don't repent. Will I be lost? Yeah. See, these are the types of sins sometimes, not that we overlook, but we don't bring out. And these are the ones that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of us, let me just say us, struggle with. These are the real things that I need to work on. Verses 7 through 12, he talks about gifts from the fathers, going back to that passage. If a child asks his dad for a fish, will he give him a stone? Of course not. And if your father, who's an earthly father, knows how to give good gifts, how much more will your Father in heaven know to give good gifts? There's a lot there, the narrow way. Of course, you know that. But chapter 8, I wanted to get to this. And here's some nuggets that I love in the reading this week. Chapter 8, he begins in earnest performing miracles. Now, he's already done one as we've seen. But he begins in earnest in chapter 8, performing these miracles. He heals a leper. He asks him if he's willing. He says he is. But here I want us to see in chapter 5, talking about attitudes. We just finished the Sermon on the Mount. Oh, one more thing before the Sermon on the Mount. Look at verse 28. So it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching. Watch verse 29. For he taught them as one having authority and not as one of the scribes. And I bet you he just had their mouth. Do you know? Can you believe what he just said and how he said it? Speechless. They were amazed. All right, chapter 8, verse 5. Talking about motivation and attitude. This is the type of attitude. Just this type of thinking. There's a centurion servant, chapter 5, or chapter 8, verse 5. Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, the centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. And Jesus said, watch, I will come and heal him. Verse 8, the centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. What an attitude. What was his attitude? Jesus said, oh, I'll come to your house and I'll heal you. What did this man say?
Speak the word.
Just speak the word. I'm not worthy for you to come in my home. Are any of us worthy on our own? I think that's a beautiful statement. Drop down to verse 14. These miracles. This is sometimes you just read things like this. And I don't know about you this week, but there was a couple of times I just laughed out loud at this part. Watch this. Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, this is verse 14, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. So it's Peter's mother-in-law. Was Peter married? Yeah. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. Watch verse 16. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with the word and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet. Now, turn over to Luke chapter 4. Let's look at this parallel account here, starting in verse 38. Luke 4, verse 38. This is, it's not comical in a ha-ha way, but just, I get this. Chapter 4, starting with verse 38. Now he arose from the synagogue and entered Simon's house, but Simon's wife's mother was sick with a high fever, and they made request of him concerning her. So he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she rose, and what did she do? Started serving.
Yeah.
That's awesome, isn't it? Look at verse 40. When the sun was setting, all those who had any that were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons also came out of many, crying out and saying, You are the Christ, Son of God. And he rebuking them, did not allow them to speak, for they knew he was the Christ. Here's the part that I can just see it in my mind's eye. The sun was setting, the word had somehow gotten out about Peter's mother-in-law. And all those who were sick, that had any who were sick with various diseases, brought them to him, and he laid hands on every one of them and healed them. What ended up happening in this town?
Pandemonium.
Everybody in the city came out. Can you imagine, in all seriousness, boy, just to see this event take place, man, I would love it. If we legitimately, is that a word? Good. Legitimately. There, that's a better word. Thank you, Jim. That didn't sound right. If we could legitimately have somebody here who was gravely sick and let the Savior touch them, rebuke the fever, rebuke the sickness, and the cancer leaves, and that person rises from their deathbed and begins to walk around and serve and all of these things, and word gets out. Can you imagine what it would be like? And then, see, picture this. This is not a fairy tale. This happened. How many people would be surrounding our building, bringing their sick folks to us? It would, at least for a while.
But what's even more is how many people still didn't believe in it.
Yeah.
Like, you have all these people who are more than willing to have their family members and their loved ones get healed. And you have other people who are like, oh, that's fake. He's not going to Christ.
Or that, they got their needs, their selfish needs fulfilled, didn't they? Hey, I don't want to follow you. No, that's I get carried away. I just wanted my wife healed. I wanted my child healed. Let's just not get too carried away. The winds and the waves, verses 23 through 27, even the winds and the waves obey him. The demon-possessed men were healed, chapter 8, verses 28 through 34. Then chapter 9. I still don't know. When the doors open, does that mean I go into the second bell? So I'm just going to keep going. You got, they did that on purpose, didn't they? I take back everything I said about our deacons on Sunday. All right, what chapters are you reading? 11 through 15. How often? Every single day. The same 5 chapters every single day.